We're always told the same thing. The more you know, the easier life gets. So we treat our minds like these giant nets, right? Trying to catch every single trend, every news story, because we're afraid that if we miss something, we're going to fall behind. But there's this quiet, unsettling truth that I think most of us eventually run into. A mind that tries to process everything eventually loses its ability to process anything deeply.
So, does this sound familiar? Have you ever felt like your mind is both your absolute greatest strength and your heaviest burden? If that hits home, you are in exactly the right place. See, high intelligence isn't just about being able to think. It's often the weight of a brain that just doesn't know how to turn off. And it's probably because you haven't yet learned the incredible art of choosing what to ignore. And that right there, that's the core paradox we're digging into. Psychology shows that being highly intelligent doesn't get rid of life's struggles. It just changes what they look like. So many intellectually driven people feel completely overwhelmed, not because there's something wrong with them, but because their brains are literally wired to process reality on a totally different, much deeper level. Now have a look at this list. What's so important to understand here is that this describes a feature, not a flaw. A highly active mind is built for continuous processing. It can't help but automatically analyze information, replay conversations over and over, and question decisions long after they've been made. This isn't just everyday anxiety. It's a state of intense internal thinking that leads to this profound, deep sense of mental exhaustion. And this is the crucial takeaway here. If this feels familiar, you are not failing. Your mind isn't weak or undisciplined. It is simply working overtime, processing patterns and risks and consequences that most people just don't see. And without a filter, that amazing gift becomes a source of chronic stress. So how in the world do we find that filter? Well, that's what's next. Let's talk about the brain's hidden switch, the key that can help us shift from that state of constant overwhelm to one of real, focused control. The entire mechanism really comes down to this one powerful psychological concept, cognitive inhibition. Now, we usually think intelligence is about how much information you can take in, but a lot of research suggests extreme intelligence is actually defined by the ability to stop. It's the power to create a mental gap, a pause, between something happening and how you react to it. And that pause is everything. And this comparison just lays it out perfectly. Without that pause, we get stuck in survival mode. That's just instant reactions, emotional impulses. It's a recipe for endless mental clutter. But when we intentionally use that cognitive inhibition, we shift into reasoning mode. We create the space for a logical response, and from that space, we get true mental clarity. Here's a great way to think about it. Picture your focus as a finite resource, almost like a battery that drains way faster than it recharges. So the critical question becomes, how do the most resilient minds choose to spend that incredibly precious energy? Well, this chart shows a pretty typical split. A lot of people drain their mental battery on what psychologists call social identity dependence. It's that constant chase for trends, for public approval, for feeling like you belong to the right group. It's so exhausting because it's an unstable, never-ending game. But the most resilient minds, they flip this completely, relying on internal validation that comes from their own values and their own deep interests. I absolutely love this quote from the source material because it's just so direct. People who are internally validated, they don't need to wear a team's jersey to know who they are. Their sense of self is stable. It's a foundation, not something that needs to be constantly propped up by whatever the crowd is doing. So let's look at them side by side. Trend-dependent minds are motivated by what other people think, by external approval, so their focus is always on image and appearance. Independent minds, though, they're driven by their own internal standards, so they value function and usefulness. They're totally comfortable being out of sync with everyone else because their identity is self-defined. It's stable.
All right, so if our focus really is a battery, how do we stop the constant drain and start protecting our charge? This is where we get practical. Let's get into 3 acts of mental survival that you can literally start using today. First up, reduce your internal emotional language. Just shifting your inner monologue from "this is terrible" to "this is inconvenient" can keep your brain in a logical, problem-solving mode. Second, practice what's called cognitive distancing, basically using logic to look at your emotions from a slight distance so they can inform you without completely consuming you. And third, and this one's huge, stop trying to learn everything at once. Instead, commit to one difficult skill. That focus struggle actually upgrades your brain's architecture through what's called neuroplasticity, which is just your brain's amazing ability to rewire itself. So let's bring this all home and look at how this all builds to a powerful and kind of counterintuitive new perspective on what intelligence really is. It's not about being the busiest person in the room, it's about being the most selective. This is the core message right here. True intelligence isn't loud, it is controlled. It's that quiet ability to look at the 1,000 things screaming for your attention and calmly decide that 999 of them just don't matter. You know, we so often feel guilty for our silence or for not being interested in what's popular, but psychology is very clear on this. That restraint, that selective ignorance, is not a sign of weakness or being emotionally distant. It is a sign of profound cognitive strength and confidence. So as you go about your life, just remember this. Your mind is a sanctuary, not some public square that's open to every passing thought and opinion. The most powerful thing you can possibly do for your intelligence, and honestly for your peace, is to be unapologetically selective about what you allow to live inside it. Because once you understand how your mind actually works, you can stop fighting against yourself and finally start working with it.